The forbidden assignment Jared Voss didn't ask for this job, once a proud soldier of the Terran Defense Force. He had commanded a small squad during border patrol missions. He was sharp, disciplined, and loyal, but after punching a superior officer during a heated argument, everything changed. He wasn't thrown in jail, just pushed somewhere worse. They reassigned him to diplomatic guard duty now instead of action. He stood in fancy halls guarding people who wore more jewelry than clothing, politicians, spoiled royals, useless nobles from alien empires who only care about power and parties, and today he had drawn the worst assignment of them all, Princess Salera of the Archon Dominion. Even her name gave Terran officers a headache. She was beautiful, dangerous, and known across the galaxy for her wild behavior. Some called her a galactic seductress, others called her a ticking time bomb. Her record spoke for itself: 3 broken peace talks, 5 embarrassed ambassadors, and 1 mysterious incident that led to a full star system locking its gates to the Dominion. And now Jared had to be her personal guard. He stood stiff at the front of her private quarters on the orbiting diplomatic station. The air smelled like perfume, and the door slid open, and there she was, wearing nothing but golden paint across her lavender skin, with glowing symbols of peace drawn along her arms and thighs. Her long silver hair floated slightly in the artificial gravity. Her violet eyes sparkled as she smiled at him. "Oh," she purred, "they sent me a new one." Her voice was soft, teasing. "Are all humans this?" Serious-looking Jared didn't blink. "Princess, you need to put on clothing," she giggled. "Why are you shy?" He didn't answer, just kept his eyes locked straight ahead. No reaction, no weakness, but inside he was screaming. She walked closer, her bare feet quiet on the polished floor. "Tell me your name, Guard Sergeant Jared Voss." She leaned inches from his face. Jared, Mom's strong name. He didn't move, didn't speak, just waited. Eventually she sighed and turned away. "Fine, I'll behave for now." Over the next few hours, Jared followed her to boring diplomatic events. She flirted with every life form in the room, causing whispered chaos as she danced, drank, and laughed loudly. But behind every joke, Jared saw something else, a kind of sharpness in her eyes, a look that didn't match the image she put on. She wasn't just wild, she was hiding something. Later that night, Jared stood outside her quarters again. All was quiet. Then a soft voice called from behind the door. Sergeant Jared stepped inside. Salera sat alone on the edge of her bed, her long cloak draped around her shoulders. For the first time she looked normal, no makeup, no games. She stared out the large window at the stars. "They think I'm stupid," she said quietly. Jared said, "Nothing. They think I'm a little princess who plays dress up and causes trouble, but they don't know what it's like to grow up in the Dominion, to be raised as a tool." He frowned. "You're not a tool." She looked at him truly. "Look, do you believe that even after everything you've seen today?" "I believe what I see now." And he said, "Silence." Then she whispered something that made his blood go cold. "There, coming from me, Jared, even here." He stepped closer. "Who?" She shook her head. "I don't know who I can trust anymore. But if they find me, I'm dead, and it won't be an accident. It'll be made to look like one." Jared's hand moved toward his sidearm. Without thinking, "You think I'm just playing around," she said. "But I'm not. I've done something the Empress will never forgive." Jared narrowed his eyes. "What did you do?" Zila stood slowly, her voice dropping. "I stole something. Something sacred, something only a true heir could access." She stepped closer, her expression serious. "For the first time, I need someone who doesn't play politics. Someone who follows their gut. That's why I picked you." Jared blinked. "Picked me? This wasn't a random assignment." She smiled faintly. "No, I asked for you, Jared Voss. You just didn't know it." His heart pounded. This wasn't just another royal babysitting job. He was in the middle of something big, something dangerous, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't want to run the game behind the throne. Jared Voss had been many things in his life: a soldier, a squad leader, even a convict for 2 days after the punch that wrecked his career. But never had he felt as out of place as he did now. He wasn't babysitting a spoiled alien princess. He was standing next to a living mystery, and the mystery was starting to unravel. The morning after strange warning, everything returned to normal, or so it seemed. She was back to her usual tricks. Jared found her lounging upside down on a levitating sofa, sipping a glowing drink with 3 straws, wearing a silk robe that did very Little to actually robe anything when she saw him. Entered, she winked. On my favorite wall of muscle. Jared didn't respond. He just scanned the room like, usual old soldier habits never died. Relax. She said, I haven't broken any intergalactic laws today. He gave her a sharp look. Yesterday you said someone was coming for you. She shrugged and looked away. That was yesterday, but he saw the tightness in her jaw, the flicker of fear. Behind her eyes she was pretending again the silly flirty act like armor later. That day she insisted on attending a diplomatic gala aboard the station's grand hall, a golden chamber filled with powerful beings from across the stars, nobles from the Zerani Empire, tech barons from the Solari Collective. Even a silent assassin from the glass moons stood along the outer rings, and in the middle of it all Zalera, twisting through the crowd like a flame, laughing too loud, whispering into ears that didn't deserve her attention, dipping her fingers into other people's drinks just to see their reactions to. The other, she looked like a wild party girl. To Jared, she looked like she was marking people he watched carefully. Every joke she made was delivered near a known information broker. Every dance step led her close to political enemies. Every laugh covered the moment she slipped something small into someone's pocket or took something out. This wasn't chaos, it was strategy. That night back in her chambers, Jared finally confronted her. You're not what you pretend to be, he said. Solara sat at her desk brushing her silver hair with slow, thoughtful strokes. Oh, and what do I pretend to be? A fool, Jared answered, but you're planning something. She turned and smiled sadly. You're smarter than most guards. That's why I chose you. You still haven't told me what you stole. Her expression darkened. She stood and walked to the window, arms crossed in the Archon Dominion. There is something called a life vault. It's buried beneath the royal tower, guarded by machines older than most stars. Only someone of true royal blood can enter. Not even the Empress can do it. Without her hair, she turned to face him. I went inside. I didn't tell my mother. I took something no one has seen in 1,000 years. Jared frowned. What kind of something? Code, she said. DNA, strands, templates, the original blueprints of the Dominion's royal bloodline. Not just for ruling, but for creating new rulers. You stole the future of your entire empire. She nodded. And now they want me erased. Jared took a step back, trying to absorb it all. You're telling me you made yourself a target of the most powerful family in the galaxy and then requested me to stand between you and them? Zillara laughed softly. You make it sound so reckless. It is reckless, Jared snapped. Why me? She stepped closer, her voice suddenly gentle. Because I read your file. You don't follow orders. You follow your heart. You protect people, not politics. I need someone like that. Just then the lights flickered. Jared's instincts kicked in. He grabbed her and pushed her behind the nearest pillar just as the window shattered. A thin spinning blade flew across the room and embedded into the far wall, sizzling with venom. 3 figures dropped silently from the ceiling, cloaked in black with glowing green eyes. Jared didn't wait. He drew his plasma sidearm and fired. The first assassin went down. The second vanished into a mist, reappearing behind him. But Kara kicked a chair into its path, buying Jared just enough time to shoot. The third turned towards Zallara, but Jared lunged and tackled him hard, slamming him into the floor, breathing heavily. Jared looked up. Zallara stood over him, clutching a small silver disc. Her hand trembled. They were Arkan, she whispered. My own people, my mother's elite guard. Jared stared at the bodies. This wasn't a game anymore. He looked at her. We need to leave now. Zallara nodded, her voice shaking. Agreed, but first, Jared added, gripping her shoulder, you're going to tell me everything. Runaway royalty. Jared Voss wasn't thinking about orders anymore, or protocol, or consequences. He was thinking about survival and the princess who just became the most wanted woman in the galaxy. The two of them ran through the silent metal corridors of the diplomatic station. No alarms, no flashing red lights, just a deadly calm, the kind that came before it killed. Jared led the way, his sidearm hot from the earlier firefight. He had already disabled 2 surveillance nodes, bypassed 3 locked doors, and left 1 unconscious guard in the supply closet. No time for explanations behind him. Zallara ran barefoot, her royal robe torn and dragging behind her, but she didn't complain. She didn't ask questions. She didn't cry. She just kept running. They reached the hangar bay. Jared had already made a choice He wasn't staying behind. Not this time, and not just because of her secrets. It was something else now. Here, Jared said, pulling her toward a hidden maintenance panel. There's a small skimmer behind that bulkhead used for hull inspections, not on the official logs. Solera raised an eyebrow. You have secret ships stashed away. I have backup plans. They climbed inside the tiny ship. It was barely larger than a cargo pod, with only 2 seats and manual. Controls. Jared flicked switches, overrode the station's docking blocks, and launched the skimmer into open space. No clearance, no warning, no turning back. The stars swallowed them whole for the next hour. They drifted in silence, hidden in the electromagnetic wake of a nearby freighter. The skimmer had no jump drive, but Jared had something almost as good as signal scrambler and the flight codes to a nearby salvage station long abandoned by the Terran fleet. It would be their hiding place for now. Solera sat curled in the passenger seat, arms wrapped around her knees, watching the stars pass. Do you think they'll follow? She asked. Softly. Jared didn't look at her. They already are. She nodded her eyes. Distant good. He glanced at her. Good. If they're chasing me, she said, it means I. Still mad at the salvage station was a dead hulk of rusted steel and broken dreams floating in the shadows of a dying gas giant. It had once repaired warships. Now it was just bones. Jared docked the skimmer and led her through airlocks filled with dust and echoes. He found an old officer's quarters, mostly intact, and patched the power grid lights. Flickered to life. The room smelled like ozone and oil. Not exactly a palace, but was safe for now. He turned to her. Well, stay here a day or two. Let them lose our trail. Seller sat on the edge of the cot. Why are you still helping me? Jared paused. It was a fair question. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe because someone tried to kill you while you were asking for help. Maybe because you looked me in the eye and told the truth. Or maybe, she said quietly, because you feel alone too. He said nothing. She lay back on the cot, staring at the ceiling. I used to dream of this, she whispered. Not being hunted, I mean, but being free from the palace, from expectations, from the fake smiles and forced dances. Freebie. Just Solera. Jared sat across from her. Who is just Solera? She laughed, but there was no joy in it. I don't know. I was never allowed to find out. They spent the next 2 days hiding in the shadows. Jared made small repairs to the station's power core. Solera explored its old corridors, sometimes silent, sometimes curious, like a child seeing a new world. She found a storage bay full of Terran engineering tools and spent hours trying to guess what each device did. She was wrong most of the time, but she smiled the first time since they'd met. Jared saw her as something more than a puzzle or a mission. He saw her living, not playing a role, not performing, just being. And for the first time in years, he felt alive too. One night, as they sat near the old observation window, watching the swirling storms of the gas giant below, she turned to him. Do you think we'll make it where? Anywhere. Alive. Jared leaned back, arms folded. I think we'll die the moment we stop running. She was quiet for a moment, then whispered, I'm tired of running. He looked at her then. Tell me everything, no more half-truths. She hesitated, then she opened her palm. And it was a small silver cube that, she said, is a Dominion's genetic vault key. With it, I can rewrite the royal bloodline. I can create heirs without the Empress, without her approval, without her control. Jared's stomach turned. You're telling me you control who rules the most powerful empire in the galaxy? No, she said. I'm telling you, I just made myself the most dangerous woman alive. And that's when the power went out. A red light blinked across the wall. A warning. Jared reached for his weapon. Someone just entered the station. He said, they found us. Solera stood. Slowly, then, let's make sure they regret it. Close quarters and closer hearts. The lights were out. The air felt too still, the kind of still that meant something. Was listening. Jared moved first, silent, and focused. In one hand, he held his sidearm, in the other, a handheld scanner that glowed faint blue. Followed behind him, her bare feet barely making a sound on the metal floor. She tied back her silver hair, and her robe had been swapped for a dark utility jacket they'd scavenged from the old station lockers. She no longer looked like a princess. She looked like someone ready to fight for her life. The two of them crept through the shadows of the station. Jared's scanner picked up a faint energy signal. One intruder, maybe. To no heavy weapon fire, no ship seen from the outer port. That was bad, whoever. They didn't want to kill from a distance. They wanted to get close. They set a trap. Jared rerouted auxiliary power. To a sealed cargo hold they waited, in silence behind a wall panel, watching through a broken vent, as a figure stepped inside humanoid light armor. Moved like a shadow. The second one followed, smaller, quieter. They spoke to each other in hushed tones. Solara tense. She recognized the dialect bloodbound. Mercenaries, she whispered, they work under the table, never talk, never stop. They'll stop, Jared muttered. He triggered the panels, locked down, the door slammed. Shut, gas hissed through a pipe, non-lethal, just enough to knock them. Cold, the figures thrashed for a moment, then silence. Hours later, they stood in the station's command room, watching security feeds as the stars turned slowly outside. The adrenaline had worn off, but the tension hadn't leaned against the cold metal. Console, how they find as Jared frowned. Someone's tracking either you or the vault key. She looked down at the silver cube in her hand. It doesn't have a beacon. I made sure then they got spies in the Accord, or maybe even inside the Dominion's own resistance. She laughed bitterly. Of course they do. Why should one part of my life not be a lie? Later, back in the officers' quarters, Jared sat cross-legged on the floor, cleaning his weapon. Solara lay on the cot above him, staring at the cracked ceiling like it held the secrets of the universe. You never told me about Earth, she said suddenly. Jared didn't look up. What about it is it really full of? Oceans and forests and people who laugh for no reason. He nodded. And bars where people argue over sports, street musicians who play for credits, kids who get into trouble and blame their siblings. She smiled. Sounds noisy, it is. I think I'd like it. He looked up at her. You would. There was a quiet moment. One of those strange silences that didn't feel empty, just real. Tara sat up. Do you ever miss your old life? Jared shrugged. Sometimes, but I never liked following orders, especially the kind that come from people who've never seen a battlefield. She tilted her head. Then why did you join the defense force? He hesitated. To protect people who couldn't protect themselves. She nodded slowly. That's what I want. He looked at her carefully. Are you sure about that? She met his eyes. I've spent my whole life being told what I am, what I must become, what I must sacrifice, and for the first time I've stolen a little control. Back then, she added almost in a whisper, and I'm scared. He put down his weapon and stood. You're allowed to be scared. She looked up at him, and for a moment, the royal mask she always wore, flirty, sharp, unshakable, just fell away. She wasn't a princess. She wasn't a fugitive. She was just a woman who had never had a chance to choose her own life. Can I tell you something? She asked. Of course. I never thought I'd survive long enough to feel safe, even for one night. Jared stepped closer. You are safe with me. She reached out slowly, her fingers brushing his hand. It was just a touch, but it felt like something more, a bridge between two broken people. They stood there for a long time. Neither moved, neither spoke, and then she leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't wild or rushed or part of some plan. It was quiet, gentle, real. When she pulled away, she rested her forehead against his. I don't want to be alone anymore, she whispered. You're not, he said. They fell asleep side by side, curled on the narrow cot in the flickering light. No alarms, no plans, just silence and the weight of two lives. Changing, but out in the black, a Dominion war cruiser slipped into orbit above the gas giant, unseen, unannounced, and on board the Empress herself, the Empress. Strikes back. They woke to the sound of thunder, but there was no storm, only the station groaning beneath the pressure of a massive gravitational field above them. Jared was on his feet in seconds, weapon drawn. Solara followed close behind, clutching the cube, the key that had made her the most hunted woman in the galaxy. Outside the station's viewport, the stars had vanished. Something had blotted them out. The Archon war cruiser hung in orbit like a shadow given form over 4 kilometers long, plated in obsidian armor and ringed with jagged towers that pulsed with blue fire. Its engines didn't hum, they growled like an ancient beast waking up. It didn't send fighters, it didn't fire weapons, it didn't have everyone who saw a ship like that knew what it meant. The Empress had arrived. Jared scanned for escape options. There were none. Their skimmer was still docked, but it couldn't outrun a capital ship. The station's jump drive was dead. Communications were jammed. The old base was a coffin, and the Dominion held the hammer. We have to run. Jared said no. Solara said quietly, we can't. He turned sharply. What do you mean we can't destroy this? Station. She didn't look at him. Her face had gone pale, her eyes locked on. The massive ship above them. She's here. Salera whispered. I can feel. Her. Jared frowned. Who? My mother. A voice crackled across every speaker in. The station's smooth, cold royal. This is Empress Vera of the Archon Dominion. You are harboring my daughter. Return her immediately, and you will not be harmed. Refuse, and we will rip your sanctuary apart atom by atom. There was no emotion. In the voice, no anger, just complete, unshakable control, the voice of someone who had never once been told no. Salera didn't move, didn't speak. Jared grabbed her shoulders. We can still hide. She shook her head. You don't understand. If I run again, she'll hunt everyone I've ever touched, every resistance cell, every Terran contact, every child who ever looked up to me. Her voice broke. She'll kill them all. To make a point, Jared clenched his jaw. Then what are you saying? Stepped back and pulled something from the inside of her coat, a small golden ring. If I send this signal, she said, she'll know I surrender. She'll take me alive, you too. If I demand it, she won't risk harming me, not until I give back the key. And if you do, she'll take me back to the Dominion, strip my mind, reclaim the key, then kill me quietly, maybe clone me into something more. Obedient. Jared stared at her. And you're just going to give up? She looked at him. Do you have a better plan? Jared paced the floor, thinking hard. She's not expecting resistance, he muttered. She wants compliance. That's leverage. Seller sat down, exhausted. Leverage doesn't work on my mother only. Fear. He froze and slowly turned to her. What if we give her something to fear? 30 minutes later, the station came to life. Old power cores flared, antennas unfolded. Static flooded Dominion frequencies. And then came the message, a live broadcast. Across black markets, rebel nets, Terran diplomatic lines everywhere and in it. Salera standing in front of the station's Dominion flag, holding the vault key, speaking directly to her. Mother, this is Princess Stellar of the Archon Dominion. She said, her voice strong, clear, unafraid, and I speak now not as a daughter, but as the rightful heir I was. Raised in a cage made of silk, taught to smile, taught to obey, and I did for years until I saw the truth. She held up the cube. This key is more than bloodlines, more than power. It is freedom. With it, I can reshape our peoples. Future without fear, without tyranny. The feed crackled, but the signal held. I will not run anymore. If I die standing. And if I survive, I take the throne. Silence followed, and then the station shuddered. Jared grabbed a railing. They're locking weapons, but before the cruiser could fire, a new signal arrived. Hundreds of them from across the galaxy, resistance fleets, rebel freighters, even a few Terran Defense Force ships ignoring orders to stand down, all answering the same message: we stand with the Princess of Dominion. Cruiser didn't retreat, but it didn't fire either. It waited, because even Empress Flora, untouchable, unstoppable, knew what this meant. The game had changed. Her daughter wasn't a runaway anymore. She was a symbol. Back inside the station, Salera collapsed into a chair. Jared stood beside her, watching the screen. You just started a war, he said. She looked up at him, eyes tired but burning with purpose. No, she said, I just started a revolution. New life, new war. 3 months passed, no battles, no chases, no messages from the Empress, just silence, which in the galaxy they came from was more terrifying than noise. Jared and Salera now lived hidden on a small moon deep in the dusk-reached cluster, a quiet, forgotten corner of space where the stars didn't twinkle and the nights lasted 30 hours. The planet below was a frozen gas giant with rings that shimmered like broken glass. Their home wasn't much, just a repurposed outpost once used by asteroid miners, patched with salvage tech and powered by a cracked solar grid, but it had a roof, a real bed, and a sky no one else knew about. For Jared, it was peaceful. Laura, it was the first time she'd ever been free. Each day was simple. Jared worked on the outer defenses, just in case. He trained, studied the stars, and sent coded signals to the scattered rebel networks forming in Solara's name. Salera grew a garden in recycled soil, mostly herbs and protein moss. She spent hours reading old Terran books, real ones, not digital. She loved the way they smelled, the way they felt in her hands, like something permanent. And at night, they danced, not always with music, Sometimes with laughter, sometimes with silence, sometimes in bed tangled. Together like two people trying to forget the weight of the galaxy pressing down on them, and sometimes just sitting, side by side, hands touching breasts, sensing they didn't need to say it. Was love, then came the sickness. It started small, so Laura woke up dizzy one. Morning laughing it off, it's just gravity nausea, she said, rushing Jared's. Concern aside, I spent my whole life on carriers and palaces. My body's just adjusting, but the dizziness didn't stop. It came with strange craving, spiced honey from a planet she hadn't visited in years, melted snow from a Terran, tundra she'd only read about, then the fatigue, the dreams, the heat in her skin. And finally the truth. Jared stood frozen in the outpost medbay, staring at the monitor. Say it again, he whispered. Sella sat on the exam table, her hands trembling in her lap. She looked up, eyes wide, vulnerable, afraid. I'm pregnant. She said his mind went blank, then exploded with questions. How and what would it mean? She reached out, her fingers brushing his. I didn't plan it. She said softly, I didn't even think it was possible. Arc and genetics don't mix. We've tried for generations to hybridize. It always fails. Jared sank onto a nearby chair. But not this time, no, she whispered, not with you. The silence that followed wasn't fear, it was awe. Two people from worlds that hated each other too. Bloodlines never meant to cross. And somehow life had happened. A heartbeat, a future. Jared pulled her close forehead to forehead. We protect this, whatever it takes. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I won't let my child grow up in a golden cage, not like I did. He smiled. Then we better build something worth protecting. But peace doesn't last long when power is involved. 3 days later, their warning sensors lit up. A stealth probe Dominion made hidden deep in the forest outside their compound hadn't activated yet, but it was watching, recording, reporting. Jared tore it out of the snow himself, smashing it with the butt of his rifle, but it was too late. She knows, Salera whispered, watching the last flickers of signal die out. She knows where we are and what we've made. That night, they made their choice. No more hiding, no more waiting for war to knock on their door. They would go to the rebel fleet, rally the cells under Solera's name, show the galaxy, the child growing inside her, proof that the old rules were dying, that something new was coming. As they packed their things, Jared looked at her. She stood in the doorway, one hand resting lightly over her stomach, framed by the flickering lights of the outpost. He walked over and took her hand. Do you still want a throne? He asked. She looked up at him, 1,000 stars in her eyes. No, she said, I want to burn it down, a queen reborn. They didn't arrive quietly, no stealth, no shadows. This time they wanted the galaxy to see them coming. The rebel fleet emerge from jump space in perfect formation, 67 ships of all shapes and sizes patched. Freyr's old Dominion warbirds, Terran destroyers with deface insignias, and civilian cruisers retrofitted for combat. At the center of it all was one ship, black and gold, sleek and fast, the Sorco Solara's new flagship, and on its bridge stood the woman once dismissed as a laughingstock, a scandal, a problem. Now a symbol. Salera wore no crown, no flowing robe, just a simple black tunic. Her long silver hair tied back on her chest glowed the mark of the Ark and Royal House, crossed out with a crimson slash. Her left hand rested protectively over the slight curve of her belly, not hidden, not shame claimed. Jared stood beside her, armored and ready, rifle slung across. His back eyes locked on the forward screen ahead of them like a great spider. Nesting in the dark was a Dominion throne world, a gas-shrouded planet of spires and golden towers ringed by thousands of defense platforms, and above it, drifting like a god in orbit, the Empress's Citadel ship. Her mother was waiting. Terra activated the fleet-wide comms. This is Princess Talara of the Archon Dominion. She said, voice calm, strong. I bring no peace treaty. I bring truth. This war was not started by rebels. It was started by silence, by the crushing of freedom, by a system that valued obedience over life. I carry the future in my body, not a clone, not a calculated match, a real child created from love, not control. That child proves that the old rules are broken. She looked directly into the transmission feed. And today, I give the galaxy a choice: follow a dying empire, or join me and build something new. The response came swiftly. A single transmission, cold, clean, regal. Come to Sirocco descended alone, no escort, no shields, no weapons prime just. Faith Jared walked beside Celera down the landing ramp of the ship as it touched down on the palace courtyard. Hundreds of Dominion guards lined the path silent, still waiting, and at the end of that path beneath the towering arch of the Hall of Legacy stood Empress. Velour her crown was thin and sharp, made of pale light her robes flowed like liquid night. Her face was the same as it had always been, ageless, flawless. Merciless, she looked at her daughter not with fury, but with disappointment. "I raised you better than this," she said. "No." Celera answered, "You raised a weapon. I became a person on my own. You shame our house. You defiled our blood. I freed it." Vora's eyes flicked to Jared a tan. She said, "You led our legacy." Rod in a human's hands, Zalara smiled. Faintly, "It was never yours to keep." The Empress turned her back and began to walk into the hall. "You want a challenge?" She said, "Do it properly. A throne room, a duel in ancient Archon tradition. One blood versus another, not with weapons, but with a battle of minds. Memory, truth." Jared wasn't allowed in only family, only blood as the doors closed between them. Celera touched his hand one last time. "If I fall, you won't," Jared said. "You're not fighting alone anymore." Inside, silence ruled. Celera stepped into the heart of her birthright, a chamber carved from obsidian and starlight the throne sat at. Top a circular platform surrounded by glowing memory cores, every ruler's past recorded, every shame hidden behind glass. The Empress stood at its center, and they began a ritual duel of voice, memory, and confession. Each took turns speaking their truth connected to the throne's core, each memory shown to the palace too. The public to the galaxy. The Empress showed discipline, power, wars won enemies. Crushed stability. Zillera showed cruelty, fear. Broken children, forgotten planets, blood, soaked diplomacy. Then she showed her own memories. Jared, the hidden station, the stolen key. The moment she felt her child's heartbeat, the system glitched. The throne shuddered. The old power couldn't process the new truth. Outside, the sky split open. Dominion loyalists began to turn, ships drifted away, orders faded. The people had seen the truth, and when the doors of the throne room opened again, it was not the Empress who walked out. It was Salora. She stood on the palace balcony, flanked by rebel soldiers, Terran allies, and newly turned Dominion defectors. Jared took her hand. She raised the vault key high. "No more puppets, no more bloodlines, no more thrones," she declared. "From today forward, we are not ruled by blood, but by choice." Cheers shook the towers later in the quiet of their new chambers. Jared placed a hand gently on her growing belly. "Do you think the child will understand what we did?" Fella leaned into him. "They won't need," she said. "They'll live in a world where they can choose who they are. That's enough. Some say the throne still exists, buried beneath the palace ruins. Others say it burned when the old code collapsed. But one truth remains a Flirty. Princess played with fire and became the one who lit the galaxy.